What was that one core insight, the biggest friction point that the dental providers were not able to solve?
It requires a significant amount of capital investment. You need the right chairs, you need high-speed rotors, you need compressors, you need X-ray machines, you need sterilization. So there's a fair bit of capital investment that is required. Majority of our doctors who are graduating may not have access to that capital. If you did have that kind of capital investment, perhaps you start from the right level and you can move forward.
Choosing a dentist, which of these factors are more important?
Consumers are fundamentally looking for a healthcare provider they can trust from a perspective of good quality, convenient, reasonably priced. So therefore, when it comes to dental, we are most concerned about someone who will not give me a lot of pain and someone who won't rip me off, right? And who's neat and clean. It's not just treatment quality, but also the equipment and infrastructure and materials.
What are some of the systems, standardization, ways in which you ensure that the care that I will get in Clove Dental Saket is very similar to the care that I will get in Clove Dental Kormangla?
We spend a lot of time on training. Just hiring A doctors and training them to become A+ is not sufficient. Our infrastructure, there's an audit twice a month. When the patient leaves a chair, that every single chair is re-sterilized, we use AI.
Manpower cost is one of the highest cost line item in your P&L. How happy are you with the education pipeline and that feeds this raw material into your system?
We tend to normalize everybody into how do you use technology, how do you deal with integrity issues, how do you deal with price collection, how do you deal with engaging with difficult customers. So we spend some time on training and normalizing our doctors on technology, systems, processes, difficult patient handling, how do you handle teams, because sometimes they've never worked in a large team network. So those are the skills that we would add on to their extremely competent, high clinical skills.
If you were to invest 3 checks of $1 million each on somebody building an early venture in the healthcare space, what would those spaces be?
So I think I would be in healthcare tech. I would do in training, skill development, and then I will also do on manufacturing equipment and infrastructure.
Hi viewers, I'm Vivek Sinha, the founder and CEO of Emversity, and I welcome you all to this healthcare-focused podcast series, The Prognosis. So the idea behind launching this podcast was to help create next generation of leaders for the healthcare industry. And we thought, what could be a better way to do this than let leaders of today groom leaders of tomorrow? So in each episode in the podcast, we'll be talking to a top CEO or an entrepreneur from the healthcare industry. So if you're an industry professional or a clinician or an entrepreneur building for the healthcare industry, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is brought to you by the Emversity team. We are a training and recruitment platform for the healthcare industry. We do 2 things in service of our mission, which is to address the global shortage of doctors, nurses, and allied healthcare workers. First, we run work-integrated degrees and diploma programs, which are curated along with the top healthcare companies and NACA plus universities. And second, we also run an online jobs marketplace called Resume with an RX. Now, Resume is a portal which is a 10 times smarter way of getting hired by a top healthcare company in India. All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to another episode of The Prognosis. Our guest today is Singh. He is the founder and CEO of Global Dental Services. The company was started in 2010 and today they operate more than 500 dental clinics across the country under the Clove Dental brand. 2011. Oh, okay. Welcome to the show, Amrinder. Why don't you tell us?
You can call me Amar, by the way.
Okay. That's shorter. So Amar, why don't you tell us about yourself? Where are you from? How did you start? What are your life experiences? And most importantly, what led you, non-doctor, non-clinician, to start something like Clove Dental?
All right. Okay. That's a lot of questions, but okay. So I was born in Delhi. Was here till age 11. And then I was in Dehradun for a year in a military school. And then from there, my parents moved to Africa.
Do you have a defense background in your family?
No, I don't. But it turns out that in the first grade, kindergarten to grade 5, I was in 5 different schools. So I suspect that I was probably a troublemaking kid when I was young, but so be it. So I ended up in my family. My parents then thought that perhaps military school was the right place for me. And so I ended up in Rashtriya Indian Military College in Dehradun. And then my parents went to Nigeria for, kind of a sabbatical, if you will. He was working for the Delhi government, my dad. And over the summer, they took me there, and I realized that they were living an expat lifestyle, and I was in a military school, carrying bricks in my back and running fields. So I, emotionally blackmailed my parents at the age of 11 and convinced them that I should drop out of military school and and as such, I ended up in Nigeria with them. Finished my high school there and grade 10 actually. And then they were coming back to India, and the option was either I come back to India and do my grade 11 and 12 and then go to engineering school. I wasn't smart enough to get into any of those, so I figured that, so they suggested that I stay in Nigeria, and there I got into engineering school right after O levels or grade 10. So I ended up studying mechanical engineering. Graduated when I was 20 years old, tried not to run away from there, but then ended up working for a year in Nigeria, and then realizing I needed more higher education, as any typical Indian parents would tell you, bachelor's isn't enough. So I ended up going for master's in Canada.
In engineering?
In engineering. Okay. And I went to University of Waterloo, graduated with systems engineering from there, system design engineering. And then worked for about 5 years in companies like Procter & Gamble, Warner Lambert, which is now Pfizer, Bain & Company. And then in 96, I got into business school, and some business schools do often make mistakes once in a while. So Harvard did make a mistake and accepted me. So I ended up graduated there in class of 98, not many years ago. And then essentially moved to the US and worked for a tech company for a year. I was in engineering, supply chain, so I ended up working for a supply chain software company. Then in 99, just before the dot-com, there was a huge excitement around the dot-com in landscape. So I started my first entrepreneurial journey and started my first startup. Mm-hmm. Did that for a few years.
And that was in which space?
It was in education.
Okay.
It was in K-12, and it was a very interesting startup. And we had a gentleman named Lamar Alexander, who is the former Secretary of Education for the United States. He became the chairman, and me and a couple of my classmates were founders. I became the CEO, and we built that business. And then in 2002, we sold that. That then, I had my first daughter. Our first daughter and my wife's, I took 6 months off to be, and luckily had the time, so I took 6 months off. And then I joined a German software company called SAP. I spent 4 years with them, ended up running their supply chain business globally as a senior VP at SAP, which is about $1 billion at that time. Mm-hmm. And I did that for about 4 years, 2007, and then kind of got tired of working in a large company, wanted to do something more entrepreneurial. And then I did another startup with the help of Mitsui Japan. They were looking to do a turnaround of a software company that they had in-house. So we took that software company out, carved it out and turned it around and sold that business in 2010. Now, just turned 41 at that time. Daughters are 9. I had second daughter. She was now 6. And my wife said, listen, hey, if we ever want to go to India, now is the time, because they're 9 and 6. And parents, my wife's parents in Delhi, my parents in Delhi. So the motivation to come to India was actually parents, typical, 40 years, midlife, parents getting older. They're saying we don't get to see grandkids. When do we get to see them? So that got me to India. When in India, the obvious choice would have been tech. A lot of techs were getting started in 2011, 2012 timeframe. However, I felt that, moving from Silicon Valley, I was coming back from the mecca of tech, that maybe I won't survive. I'll probably want to run away, go back to Silicon Valley. So I identified 3 verticals with the objective of providing social benefit to all of those. So looked at education, energy, and healthcare. And the idea being that, hey, do some good, still for profit. I wasn't really looking at non-profit. So sure. For-profit business, but in sectors that could actually help to give back a little bit to the country. So narrowed it down to healthcare, And dental was not necessarily the number one in healthcare. It's one of the not the most obvious ones. I looked at diagnostics, I looked at renal care, diabetic care, I looked at all of those typical multi-unit primary care centers, and felt that they had a little bit of a challenge in those days that uh, you as a patient would go to a physician would then refer you, and there might be a referral fee, which I didn't feel was something I could break as a small entrepreneur. So I was looking for something that was direct to consumer, and stumbled into a dental clinic. My wife was looking for a night guard because true story, our dog in California actually chewed on our night guard. So just before coming Christmas of 2010, we went to see a dentist in Delhi, and there the dentist asked me to get my work done. I said, sure, I'll get a checkup done. It turned out I had a filling, so she said, hey, I need to do a filling. I said, sure. When I then spit in the spittoon, I noticed that the drain of the spittoon was dirty.
Oh.
And that's sort of how the dental idea came about. And then this was Christmas of 2010. And by March of 2011, I had decided that I was going to be in the dental business. And of course, my friends in the US told me that, Amar, do you know that you have not lived in India for 30 years? And you left when you were 12, you're going back when you're 42. And do you know that working in India is like pulling teeth? I'm like, hey, good idea. I'll just go in that business. So I, literally, although we don't pull many teeth, but the point being that I got into dental business that way.
Wow. And getting into healthcare can be very daunting for somebody who is not from the industry, doesn't have training as a clinician. Did you, in your initial days, get those jitters because you were not a dentist, not from the medical background?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's actually very easy, because in other fields, you think you can learn and you think you can get better at it, and therefore, and you maybe not, but you think you can. Here, I knew for a fact that I'm not going to be a dentist. So for me, it became a little easier because I was able to effectively accept that as a given weakness in my in my capability set. So therefore, I knew from early on that I will have to partner with a number of dentists who would be filling that gap for me. Now, if I parlay that to other industries, I would argue that sometimes, in my previous experiences, you feel that, hey, you can do it, but that might be too much for you to chew. Here, it was actually easier because I knew that I'm not going to be a dentist. So I knew that from day one, I would need the guidance of senior dental leaders. For the first couple of years, we had Dr. Hari Prakash, who is the former head of AIMS, HOD for AIMS in dental. He had recently retired. So when I started, I figured partnering with someone like him would be helpful. And then a few years later, Dr. Vimal Arora, who is now our Chief Clinical Officer, was retiring from the Indian Armed Forces as a Lieutenant General. So, and he joined us, and he's been with us, and he's essentially my partner in this journey. And that makes it easier in some ways.
Sure. And you guys were the first organized clinics chain in dental, right? Or was there anyone?
No, we were not the first. There were a couple others that had already started before us. There was a company called Access Dental, which unfortunately is no longer around. Then there was My Dentist, which turned into Sabka Dentist. They're still out of Bombay. Then there was another group called Partha. They're still around. So I think there were 2 or 3 groups before. Even Vasan had a dental group at that time.
The eye care company.
The eye care company had ventured into it. So there were a few. But I would say that, I guess in some ways, we have kind of weathered the storm and survived the longest. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
So when you started out, and of course you had a personal bad experience with one unorganized dentist, but
I wouldn't call it bad. I would just say enough of
okay.
And it was not bad, but it was just not what I expect from my US.
What you would expect after paying, especially
Exactly.
because it is an out-of-pocket expense. So what was that one core insight, the biggest friction point in the dental provider that the dental providers were not able to solve, that you decided as a part of Clove Dental you are going to address?
I think, unlike other medical fields, for example, a medical doctor may just need a stethoscope, a table, and a blood pressure monitor, and they're effectively functional. A dentist, to be functional, requires a significant amount of capital investment. And that kind of, you need the right chairs, you need high-speed rotors, you need compressors, you need X-ray machines, you need sterilization. So there's a fair bit of capital investment that is required. And unfortunately in India, there are not too many bank loans available to fresh graduates or people who are just to set up on CapEx. So what happens is that many dentists, those who can afford, we spend about, say, 50 lakhs, 40, 50 lakhs per location, right? So 40, 50 lakhs is not a small amount of money. And so if you're from a good family or you have some background, maybe you can set up a practice. But majority of our doctors who are graduating may not have access to that capital. So what that leads to is that they, as they should, they end up cutting corners a little bit. As they start cutting corners, then what happens is you end up not having the best equipment, you don't end up using the best materials, and if you don't do that, then the quality is not perfect. So it just goes into if the quality is not good, then the patient satisfaction is not there. So it kind of go into a negative spiral. If you did have that kind of capital investment, perhaps you start from the right level and you can move forward. So that's where we felt that our value proposition would be that, hey, let's bring in the right set of equipment, materials, and of course, beyond that, there is a whole lot of training and there's a lot of other issues, but those would be the first major issue.
Sure. There have been attempts in this space to build a rollover or a franchisor model or a marketplace, if you would use that term for it, wherein a brand comes and after the success of the first few clinics, they try to rapidly scale the model, franchisor kind of an arrangement or a brand licensing kind of an arrangement where a local dentist also becomes a part of that rollover. Of course, there are trade-offs, scale versus quality. How do you look at that strategy? And have you ever, among the 500 clinics, is everything full stack, or have you gone in that direction?
So we have about 547 locations now, and we're adding about 10 a month. So the number keeps increasing. But in healthcare, as you mentioned, franchising works very well when the franchisee is not the service provider. For example, if you were to take a franchisee of Cafe Coffee Day, for example, if you were to take one, you're likely not going to be the barista serving the coffee. So therefore, my interest, if I'm the franchisor and you're the franchisee, our interests are aligned because we both want to make sure that the coffee is served well to the customer. Now, if you also happen to be the barista and you're serving the coffee, and if you are not doing your job very well, or customers complain about you, or you do things that are inappropriate, whatever that case may be, then your and my interests get misaligned. Right? Because now I don't like the way you treat the customers, but you are the franchise owner, so it becomes challenging. So for us in dental, because unless we franchise to a non-dentist, who then hires a dentist to do the work, if you're going to franchise to a dentist who will also be the service provider treating the patient, and if there is any complaints between the patient and that particular doctor, whether it is skill set issue, whether it's personality issue, whether it's interpersonal relation issue, whether there are other kind of integrity issues, it could be any of those issues, then the franchisee and us would be at odds. And therefore we recognize that it's not that we expect our franchisee to, but it's not that difficult to be at odds because there's so many different variables. So we chose, as a result, to not do any franchising. We have followed that policy from day one. I know other groups have tried, and I think almost all of them have pulled back away from franchising models because of this reason. I don't want to be dealing with, let's say if I had 100 franchisees, I don't want to be dealing with the 100 franchisee issues or dealing with those rather than actually serving the customers. Then the focus shifts away from what is right for the patient. It shifts away into the conversation of the franchisee and the franchisor. So that's why we opted not to do it.
Got it. So, so I had a personal experience some time ago, and I had a follow-on question to that. So, had a tooth pain, went on Practo, and just
You didn't go to Clove?
No, I didn't.
Well, there you go. So, you can say your issue now, of course.
So I'll tell you when I went to Clove. I went to Clove for regular stuff like scaling. It's a no-brainer. I did not even check the credentials of the doctor treating me because it doesn't matter. It's like a 30-minute procedure. Just walk into a Clove Dental. I exactly know what to expect. Like when I walk into a McDonald's. But when I had a tooth pain, I asked a few friends and ultimately went to the doctor who my chachaji or my cousins recommended, because there I was. So let's say if I break down the experience of going into a dental clinic or choosing a dentist, probably 4 parts. One, the technical skills and the reputation of the doctor. So at least for me, that was 50%. The second is, of course, the infrastructure. The third, because I would want to experience a neat and clean place. The third would be the interpersonal skills of the doctor as well, because half of the time doctors they don't explain you, and that leads to mistrust whether the doctor is recommending a certain procedure is actually needed or not. And fourth is probably cost, which in my case may not be that relevant. So for your TG, which of these factors are, let's say, more important?
I think all of first of all, our target group is a pretty diverse and a large group. We are catering to everyone from the lower middle class, middle class to upper middle class to top tier. We are a standardized. The way I describe to people is that we are a standardized Starbucks coffee. We're neither a Taj coffee, we're nor a dhaba coffee, right? So we are kind of people who are sick and tired of dhabas may move up the chain. Some people who don't want to waste their time and spending an hour to get a coffee at Taj or pay more, they will move here because they know what they get. So we're kind of in that segment of a standardized service. Now, I think you're absolutely right that consumers would like trust in healthcare is one of the most important pieces, particularly in a dental when you are touching your very small cavity, and usually most people will appreciate and recognize that dental pain tends to be the most painful of all. There's a medical reason for it. We have a lot more nerve endings and linked to a thalamus. So there was actually a medical reason why it is such. And so consumers are never, or patients are always looking for trust. But let me ask you the question differently. 15, 20 years ago, health chains, hospital chains like Fortis, Max, and others were not around. And today, if you were to use, which hospital chain would you trust if you were to, if something would unfortunately would happen to you or your member of your family, how would you make the decision for a doctor, a hospital? Could you tell me that?
So I think in case of hospital, I would still go to a large extent with the reputation of a doctor if it is something critical.
All right.
But otherwise, for all the, let's say, regular checkup, etc., I would just walk into any of these top 5, Narayana, Fortis, Manpower.
Right. And do you believe that for high-end procedures also, that the probability that one of these have hired the best doctors of course. Is pretty likely? So therefore, 15, 20 years ago, maybe you were still doing double check. You were checking the brand of the hospital and the doctor. And I think if you were to check now, I've changed. I would have when I moved to India 15 years ago, I would do a double check. Sometimes I do a double check now if it's a cardiac issue or a brain issue. Doctor is good, chain is good. But for my super critical cardiac, brain, excluding those, I will probably pick the chain that I like. And I'll trust that the chain will employ the right doctor, and I probably go there. So it's a matter of time. Consumers are fundamentally looking for a healthcare provider that they can trust from a perspective of good quality, convenient, reasonably priced, and who's not going to rip me off. Right? These are so when it comes to dental, dental is not in our minds on par with brain or liver or right. So therefore, when it comes to dental, we are most concerned about someone who will not give me a lot of pain and someone who won't rip me off, right? And who's neat and clean. So those are so actually the name of a dentist becomes less important, more than you think. Now let's take an example. There might be a clinic of Dr. XYZ. When you peel the onion, you realize that Dr. XYZ has long gone. It is now his second or third generation or somebody else. So the XYZ name is actually the brand. So you're not going to Dr. Sharma, who's the clinic name says Dr. Gupta, but the doctor who is treating you is Dr. Sharma. So you're going to Dr. Gupta's clinic, not because Dr. Gupta is there, but you're going to a brand that became known as Dr. Gupta from your father's. So everybody in your family knew that I would go to Dr. Gupta. So effectively, even dental people will lean towards a brand. So today, at Clove, we are treating 60,000 plus patients every month.
Wow.
Right? And we have over about, more than 2 million patients, 2.8 million patients since we have been around, or 2.8 million treatments that we have done, about 1.5 million patients. So we have a pretty large network of patients. We have a pretty high retention rate. Now, let me put another point. See, an individual doctor has a lot less to lose if his brand gets tarnished, because his brand is not that well known. A big group like us, for us, our brand reputation is very important, because that's how we build. The analogy I give you is that if you go to McDonald's and you find a bad kitchen, you see something bad in one McDonald's, you'll think all McDonald's are bad, right? Which is not the case. It just happens to be that location. So therefore, the risk of having a brand like ours is that any mistake done in any center impacts our central brand. So therefore, we take extreme amount of effort and care to make sure our quality is good, our hygiene levels are very good, our doctors we hired are extremely skilled. When we hire a doctor, just because you're an MDS or a degree holder doesn't automatically approve you to treat in our clinics. We actually put you through our own internal accreditation process. So because for us, we have a lot more to lose than perhaps an individual smaller practice.
So does it also mean there's a phenomena, especially in case of multi-specialty hospital or even single specialty like IVF, a lot of clinicians get hired even by top brands for their ability to bring in business. So a celebrity heart surgeon getting hired by, let's say, a Max brings a lot of business along with him or her from a competing chain. The same is also somewhat true in case of IVF. In your case, what you look for as a clinician with good technical skills, the celebrity value doesn't matter. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, because when it comes to dental, because it doesn't come across in our brains as important as an IVF or a cardiac, is not life threatening, is not life forming, in IVF's case. So therefore the celebrity status, and secondly, because relatively speaking, as much as people think dental procedures, relatively speaking, dental procedures are very inexpensive, even though consumers might think otherwise, right? Relative to the amount of complexity involved. Did you know that actually dental is the only field in medicine which has 7 subspecialties, which means you have to get 7 MDS degrees or equivalent of those to really become an expert in the whole mouth. Brain probably has 2 or 3. Heart probably has 2 or 3. So after MBBS, a doctor in cardiology can only take 2 or 3 paths. I'm not 100% certain, but I know it's not 7.
Sure.
And so the amount of education that is required for dental sits here, the perception sits here. Whereas in cardiac, the education may be here, but the perception is there. That's just the nature of our nature of it.
I was talking to Viren Shetty, the son of Dr. Devi Shetty, and I asked him the same question, that why are cardiologists, by the way, treated as gods? So he gave a very good insight. If a cardiologist doesn't, especially a cardiac surgeon, doesn't do his job well, then the patient loses his or her life on the operation table itself. So probably that's why, because the outcome in the bad outcome is so extreme.
Yeah, exactly.
That they are treated like
and so therefore in dental, if you realize, I don't know if you can, if you asked the local community, they'll tell you who is the best doctor in that local community. But you've asked some average population in Delhi or any city to name the top dentist, they would not know. So therefore, and the reason is because it's not that important in our brain. So what we care for as consumers is we want to make sure that it's a reliable, good quality doctor who's qualified. So somebody has to tell me that he's qualified. Now, how do you do that? Well, you outsource that decision to Clove, because you know that an organization like Clove would not hire a person unless they're well qualified, because we have a lot to lose. Then you want to make sure that there is some level of consistency in terms of quality, hygiene, because dental is a blood and a saliva related procedure, which means if you don't have high quality, and I'll talk to you later about all the things we do to ensure quality, but you need to have high quality. And then you need to be reliable on pricing. And the last thing is you want to be assured that the materials that are being used in your mouth are actually the genuine materials you're paying for, right? So the filling material, you can buy a 3M filling material, or you can buy a generic 3M material, or something that is even not even approved. You don't know. So how do you know that you are getting? So the trust is not just treatment quality, but also the equipment and infrastructure and the materials.
Sure. And while it may sound very obvious giving the Starbucks experience across 500 clinics, but it's not just a product delivery, it's far more complex. There's skill, competency involved.
Absolutely.
So why don't you tell our viewers, what are some of the systems, what are some of the standardizations, what are some ways in which you ensure that the care that I will get in Clove Dental Saket is going to be very similar to the care that I will get in Clove Dental Koramangala?
Sure.
How did you end up in?
That's a very good question, right? So how do you create somewhat of a standardization in a fairly human-driven activity, right? And that was a very fundamental question that we asked early on, right? So we look at it begins by first making sure that you're hiring the right kind of people, right? So recruitment, you start at recruitment. And so we only recruit from the top tier colleges, graduates of those, and at all levels, right? So we are not, there'll be certain colleges that we will not recruit from, just like an engineering school, there are good and bad colleges. Similarly, dental has good and bad colleges. So we'll just focus on the top tier colleges, number one. Then there is a level of training that you ought to bring. The doctors may be they are very clinically sound, but clinical skills they're a prerequisite and very critical, but they're not sufficient. You need to have then, the people skills, the soft skills, ability to engage with the patient, empathize when the patient is in pain, solve that problem, be able to articulate the various solutions that the patient may have, be able to reason with them why the treatment would cost so much. So there is a fair bit of non-clinical skills that unfortunately not all colleges do a good job of. So we spend a lot of time on training. So recruitment, step number one, training then becomes step number two. Then the third thing then is, how do you ensure every day that our A doctors are operating at an A level? So recruiting ensures that we hire A doctors. Training ensures that we make them A plus.
Yeah.
But now that's not sufficient, because you and I are maybe A players, but are you going to be 8 hours a day, 6 days a week?
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be 1 or 2 hours in that 6-day period that you are not operating at A, you're at B, because maybe something is bothering you, maybe you're thinking about your girlfriend, your mother, your normal life challenges. You may be distracted. So that's not sufficient. So for us, just hiring A doctors and training them to become A plus is not sufficient. We want to make sure that they're A 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Now, how do you do that, right? There are 3 levels of quality checks that we do. Number one is we check our infrastructure twice a month. There's an audit that every clinic goes through, where an unannounced independent team of dentists who work separately in a quality department would go unannounced to the clinics to make sure that each and every center is following all the SOPs around sterilization, about paperwork, about consents, about treatment. So everything that happens outside your mouth, they will audit it, and our doctors' compensation is tied to the outcome of that. Wow. So it's not that, we'll just do the audit for if they do not meet a certain audit, the clinic head of that location will see an impact on his or her compensation.
And most of your doctors are full-time with you?
All our doctors are full-time.
Okay.
Right? We have a policy that we have all doctors who work for us full-time. In other words, they may not be working full-times. Sometimes we have a large number of female doctors, because 70% of our doctors are women, and we're very proud of that. But sometimes they need to take care of their other personal issues. But they will be 100% dedicated to us. They may work 80 hours a week or 40 hours a week, or they make 20 hours a week, but they will only work for a dental group like us. They won't work anywhere else.
Makes
right?
sense.
Okay. So coming back to the third, so quality, once we do a clinic review, the second thing we do is that because everything in our system is digitized, we are, from the time you walk in to every tooth of yours, x-rays, images, your diagnostic notes, your treatment plans, your treatment done. The good thing about dental is that because you're dealing with hard tissue and soft tissue, you have to take an x-ray before to see how deep the problem is. You have to take an x-ray during to see if I've cleaned out all of the bacteria, and you take an x-ray afterwards to see if I've filled it properly. So this is dental standard protocol globally. Sure. But what we have done is we've digitized it. So what that tells us is that every time you walk into our clinic, we have the entire digital history of what happened to you. So what we do is, when you leave the clinic, we'll anonymize your digital record. We'll take your name out, take the doctor's name out, and we will send this record from Delhi to our doctor in Bangalore. And a doctor from Bangalore will send it to Hyderabad, and so on and so forth. So there's no partiality, and there will be a peer review. Another doctor will review that case, and we review 60% of all cases and 100% of all complex cases, as dental complex cases would be. For example, root canals, implants, aligners, braces, all of those that are high value, high complexity, 100% of those. But cleanings and others, we probably don't do 100% reviews. So on average, we will audit 60% or a peer review of 60% of the cases. So that's the second way we handle quality. The third way is, well, that's not sufficient. Okay, you've handled the infrastructure. You've handled what the doctor is doing inside the mouth by getting a second opinion. And therefore, we know that what the doctor has done. So the good news is doctors don't like their peers to embarrass them. Doctors will be okay with a business guy like me embarrassing them, because they probably say he doesn't know what he's talking about. But they are much more, aware and much more concerned about a peer viewing them differently. So therefore, that brings all our A guys, brings them to the A level every single time. Right? The third quality check we do is, when the patient leaves a chair, we have to wipe that chair, that operatory area, the spittoon, the light, the instrument tray, that has to be re-sterilized, because you're dealing with blood and saliva. Now, this job is done by a dental assistant who is probably not a college graduate. In some cases they are, but mostly they're not. Well trained by us, but they're doing this job 10 to 20 times a day in a clinic, 6 days a week. So they're just white. And sometimes they're also human. When you do a repeat road task like that, it is quite possible that one time you miss out on one area. Now, nobody ever finds out about this, because blood and saliva are not necessarily visible. Of course, the visible spots he will clean, but sometimes the non-visible part. So to make sure that every single chair is re-sterilized, we use AI. Our cameras are recording the actions of the dental assistant when he's cleaning the chair. And the AI is checking to make sure that the cleaning process is in line with what is required, what is standard. And if the AI says yes, then the signal is sent to the chair to say, yes,
Next procedure.
the chair is ready.
Okay.
Right? We are the only ones in the whole world that I know of at this point who do this for dental. So for us, ensuring quality starts by recruiting the right people. So a long answer to your question, but recruiting, training, and then making sure every single time, every single service is monitored for quality, because there is no room for error. Just because one person shows up with you when you're behaving B, for them, he went to a B environment.
Sure.
So our doctors, we are very proud with the way we monitor the system. They are always operating at an A+. Now, they're humans, of course. Humans will the patients will, annoy them sometimes. So those are all normal, human interactions. But from a systemic perspective, from a quality perspective, we have standards that's the only way we get to 547 clinics and growing and be able to maintain quality consistently.
Wow, that's really fascinating.
Sorry, a long answer to your question. But
it's really fascinating. And I think this is the real power of what a brand can do. Because I'm assuming the payback of every clinic will be in some years. There's a high amortization cost involved because of 50 lakh capex. There's a high OPEX because of using standardized material like 3M. There's a cost of, I'm assuming when you recruit a dentist,
they're all on salary. They get fixed salaries, so they're not. They're getting they're getting paid even if they're not delivering the patient volume.
There's a huge upfront L&D cost. There are leases. An individual practitioner can, especially somebody who is not already sitting on high accruals, or let's say comes from money, won't be able to invest in all these infrastructure technology. So
and I think that's the value add. I think that's the value add. For us, there are, there might be stories we've heard that doctors might change the materials. You think you're paying for material A, but they're using material B. All of those, there are typical things that happen in this part of the world, unfortunately. But for a brand like ours, it's just not worth our while, right? Our brand reputation is far more important than us trying to, do any skimping. So therefore, the quality that's the reason why globally in healthcare, brands have become successful. There are many, many dental chains. In the US, there are probably chains that have over 2,000 clinics, and there are probably 10 of them, right? So the dental chain concept is working globally because of the reasons I mentioned, because you can hold Clove to a standard which is much higher than what you may be able to hold an individual doctor to.
Sure. And at a clinic level, what's your biggest cost line item? Is it manpower cost, or is it
absolutely
manpower cost?
Yeah, because we are, our doctors are high quality, and when you are doctors and dental assistants, and then we have specialists. So our model typically is that, we run a network of 15 to 20 locations, pods or zones as we call them, and each of them will have one or two dedicated people who are resident of those clinics, who are assigned, a clinic head and a resident doctor. They're assigned in the clinic, and then each pod will have specialists, whether it's orthodontist, endodontist,
sort of hub level.
So then they will run around in these 15 pods of 15. They're all geographically close by, so that the distance of travel, so we are able to then spread into 15, 20, 30 different neighborhoods surrounding those 15 locations, and be able to cater for all the patients. So it's a very local business. Dentistry is a very neighborhood business, right? When it's like an ATM, or it's like your bank, your dudwala. It's a very neighborhood business. You're not going to go too far away from your neighborhood. Hospital is relatively a destination business. Hospital, you'll drive an hour or 2 hours because your life depends on it. Sure. But for dental, because it's every day, because it happens frequently, unfortunately, it happens often, it is more of a neighborhood business.
So if manpower cost is one of the highest cost line item in your P&L, so essentially your biggest input cost is the cost of people that you hire, dentists and dental assistants. How happy are you with the education pipeline in the country, be it BDS or be it dental assistants, the allied health education pipeline that feeds this raw material into your system? Do you have to do a lot of work, or what you get from this education pipeline is good enough to be polished and to be deployed?
Right. So India has about, the last time I checked, over 300 dental colleges of the 900 in the world.
Wow.
So we have 1/3 of dental colleges in the world. We are, again, the last time I checked, we're graduating over 30,000 dentists every year. The standards of majority, if not all of those schools, are pretty high, right? They are comparable to anyone in the world by far. So, our graduates who come out of these colleges can stand toe to toe with any doctor anywhere in the world from their competency clinical level. The challenges sometimes happen is on their exposure to society. Many of them grew up in a small town, they've never lived in a big city. So it's more around the street smarts or living in big cities or understanding the non-technical or non-clinical aspect of things where that variance comes in, right? People who are born in big cities, grew up in big cities, would have a different way of interacting with consumers. Someone who's born in a small village but very smart, went to the same college, may need a different set of resetting, if you will, right? So it's not clinical competence above par, no question about it. It's just that what we tend to do is we tend to normalize everybody into how to use technology. Because technology sometimes in colleges is not as high as what we use. So there's technology training. How do you deal with integrity issues? How do you deal with price collection? How do you deal with engaging with difficult customers? Because anybody who's walking a dental clinic is normally in pain. And when somebody is in pain, they're usually not going to be very pleasant.
Yeah.
Even if I'm having a headache, I'm going to be irritable, right? And if I'm having a toothache, it's far more severe than than headache. So we recognize that consumers will come in. So people management skills is an area. So we spend some time on training and normalizing our doctors on technology, systems, processes, difficult patient handling. How do you handle teams? Because sometimes they've never worked in a large team network. So those are the skills that we would, if you will, add on to their extremely competent, high clinical skills, medical skills. With respect to dental assistants, unfortunately, there are not too many dental assistant training institutes, right? So there, we actually run a 2-year training program, which requires 3 months in the classroom, and then a year and a half or 18 months or 20 months worth of practical on-the-ground training under a senior dental assistant or under a doctor. So we are actually training, and we today have about 1,100 dental assistants all over the country, and all of those have gone through our rigorous training. And oftentimes, many of the individual doctors tend to hire some of our dental assistants because they're that good, but that's just the reality. If you are the largest player in the industry, the smaller players will come and poach staff from you. Sure. But often most of them come back because they realize the level of care, the level of systems that we have. It's much easier to work in a highly structured environment than not. Yeah.
So I think the trend is similar to how it is for other healthcare segments. So we are producing enough doctors for any course that is aspirational in nature.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to grey-collared, the education pipeline also doesn't exist. Credentialing also doesn't exist.
Exactly right.
Ideally, there should have been a standardized credentialing for dental assistants as well. Right? Same is the case with caregivers and therapists and technicians. Something to do with taboo of not, let's say, wearing a white coat?
I think it's not. I don't think that maybe. And again, I'm maybe speaking out of line here because I'm not involved in the regulatory environment or the government environment. I have very limited knowledge. So I'll say this up front. What I'm about to say comes with limited knowledge.
Sure.
But I would argue that it's probably difficult for the individual who becomes a dental assistant to spend 2 or 3 years in college and pay those fees, right? Because they don't have that kind of money.
Sure.
So unless you can find institutions that are supported by large organizations like us, or private sector or public sector or whatever the case may be, it is difficult to expect an individual who would probably make the same amount of money. We'll probably pay him the same amount of money had he gone to that college or didn't. So therefore, it doesn't make sense for them the way the system is today. So what we do then, of course, is we are employing them. We're putting them on minimum wages for a while, and we're training them. And then as they develop, in fact, we are very proud. We have a number of dental assistants who have graduated out of the dental to the blue collar, from a blue collar environment to a white collar environment. We have a gentleman sitting not too far from here who used to be our dental assistant and now has become an executive, and he's so proud that we have literally taken him to the next segment of his society. So it's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Out of the 60,000 procedures that you do on a monthly basis, how many are preventive, how many are curative, and how many are cosmetic, approximately?
Cosmetic, none, because we are not. We are a healthcare company.
Got it.
We don't do cosmetic treatments. Now, that being said, do we do implants? We do implants. Do we do braces? We do lots of braces. We do aligners? We do aligners. But all of those are done to correct your deformities. Because in dental, now you may as a consumer may be more motivated by saying, hey, if I have a crooked teeth, I want to fix it to look better. So in your perspective, that may be a cosmetic treatment. But from our clinical point of view, that the fact that your tooth is offline means that you're going to have chewing problems, you're going to have disease issues. So it's a deformity. So therefore, we do only corrective procedures. You may perceive it as a cosmetic benefit. But coming to answer your question, I would say about 6 or 7% of our treatments are what we call high value, which is implants and orthodontics, because these are complex. These things last several months because it takes you a while. If you do an implant, it takes a while to heal. So these are longer duration treatments. So they are about 6-7% of our volume. So 95%, 94% of our volume is typically your root canals, extractions, dentures, gum problems, children's teeth. When it comes to preventive, scaling is probably very small. I would say scaling maybe 10% of our work, but that's how most people end up coming to us. Like you would have come to us
and figured out
for scaling, and then you say, and then you realize that there's something wrong. You then look at the environment. You interact with our high quality doctor. You see the environment. Then you might be more willing than just coming in when you have an extreme pain. So we get a lot of patients who come from scaling and then move on to become our lifeline customers.
And in this regard, is India very different from other countries, let's say the US or developed countries? The proportion of preventive?
I 100%, because in most of the parts of the world, they have figured out that if you catch your dental problems sooner, the pain is less and cost is less. Right? Sure. So we highly recommend everybody that you ought to go see it. In the US and Europe, they say twice a year. But in India, we're saying at least, guys, come once a year. It doesn't cost you that much to go see a dentist once a year. But so that you can catch the problem before they turn into a serious problem, then requires more complicated treatments. Right? So I think in the US and Europe, because a lot of people understood that, insurance also came in. And you're able to then, the insurance mathematics works if you can then provide plans to the consumers, dental plans to the consumers, so that they can, and that then improves their recurring visits. So I think we are not there yet, but we are on our way, because now I know last year or so, OPD insurance has come in healthcare. I think as the next after OPD would be dental. It's sort of a inpatient insurance, then OPD insurance, and then dental. It's sort of it moves in that spectrum. So it's on its way.
What would you say is the major issue for this trend? Is it affordability? I'm assuming dental care in India is far more affordable compared to...
Significantly more affordable.
So is it one of the reasons? Because
typically our prices are 1/7 to 1/10 of what they are in the Europe and US.
So you can't afford to have things go bad in other country. But whereas in India, even if you have to get a, let's say, complex treatment like a root canal done, it would break the bank.
It's not about the breaking the bank. Sure, the problem. Let's take an example, right? So I'm not a dentist, so I precursor this by saying I'm not a dentist, but I've been around in this business for 12 years, so I know a little bit. Your problems begin with a small cavity. Left unintended, the cavity grows. Then the cavity grows, it grows in your roots of your teeth, which requires root canal treatment. So cavity, if you address it, it'll just be a filling. If you, before cavity, you're just scaling and polishing, you'll take care of the plaque. Cavity, you'll have to do a filling. If you don't fix it because it hasn't bothered you, it goes into your roots. If it goes into your roots, now you're looking at a root canal treatment, which is more complex and intricate. If you don't even, sometimes root canal treatments, the bacteria goes so deep that the only solution is extraction because you can't fix it. So you've gone from a simple cavity, if you fixed it then, it'll be easier. You've waited, you've gone into a root canal. Root canal is painful and, it's more expensive. So root canal is probably, in the 4, 5, 8, 9, 10,000 rupee range. Fillings are probably in 1,000, 2,000 rupee range, right? Then you're going into a 4, 5, 8, 10,000, depending on the complexity. Then you go to extraction. Now, extraction means now you have a missing tooth. A missing tooth then requires a bridge or a crown or an implant. Then you're going into tens of thousands of rupees, right? So scaling maybe 1,000 rupees. Yeah. What you can capture 1,000 rupees turns into a 2,000 rupees. We ignore it, turns into a 4 to 10,000 rupees, turns into a 10 to 30 or 40,000 rupees. So it all depends on how now you can say, hey, I've got 32 teeth, I can lose a few. Well, that impression, that mindset is my grandfather and his generation's mindset, not even my parents and my mindset. It's certainly not my children's.
And I think you could be a good proxy for assessing whether the behavior has changed over the last decade or not. So you have been around for 13 years, the largest footprint in the country. Have you seen this mix changing for your own business?
Absolutely. It has gotten, consumers are far, far, far more aware. And the good news is social media helps, right? Everybody, see, dental is the only field of medicine that can impact your facial beauty in a meaningful way. Mm-hmm. There is no other field of medicine that can impact your facial beauty in a meaningful way. All of that while correcting your deformity. Right? So it's not that we are doing a cosmetic treatment. It is that we are actually fixing what is flawed. And by fixing what is flawed, we are actually likely to make you prettier or more handsome. That's the benefit dental has.
Oh, I'll go visit my dentist today itself.
Absolutely. You'll be surprised, over 65% to 70% of Indians have dental deformity that impacts their looks. Their beauty, their comfort, which then impacts their confidence, impacts their job profiles, their romantic profiles, it changes a lot. And all of those are things that dentists can fix. The reason why you're not aware of it is because there was never a large group of dentists who could educate you, because education takes money, right? So when you have a large pool like people like us, now we've just gotten to a size over 500, where we are now starting to talk to our consumers and saying, hey folks, think about it. We'll fix your deformity, but the side effect of that is going to be that you will look more handsome or more prettier. Only dentists can do that. Right?
Very interesting. I was looking at your footprint. You are very densely concentrated in metros. Is it because the model is less viable in semi-urban or rural areas, or what's the reason?
See, we are at the mercy of our clinicians, right? So when the reality is all clinicians, most of them want to migrate away to, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities is fine, but beyond that, they're not willing to go.
Sure.
So, and in smaller towns, the number of dentists available becomes smaller.
Yeah.
So we are not in larger cities because that's what we think is relevant. We are in larger cities now because that's where there is a larger pool of doctors available that we
Makes
can
sense.
employ. But that being said, we are in towns like Vijayawada, Kakinada, which is a big town, Kakinada, and we're in Vizag. We are in Ludhiana, Jalandhar, Amritsar. We are in Jaipur. So these are towns, Ahmedabad, Pune. So these are a little bit bigger cities. Of course, we are in our Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Mumbai. Those towns we are in, but we are also in level 2 city, and we'll keep growing. So our plan today, we have about 547 locations. We are on our way to 5,000 clinics. I mean, there's no reason why we're not gonna, we'll keep growing at 100, 120 locations for the next, for however long. The market demand is there. Do you know that India's population increases by the size of Australia every 18 to 24 months?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So, out of these 547, do you have an international footprint as well?
We don't, and also by choice, because dental is highly regulated for good reasons.
Okay.
Because you want to make sure that your treatments the doctors qualified are rightly qualified, and different requirements vary by country by country.
Got it.
And for us, my objective moving back to India was to give back to my motherland. So, I spent enough years working internationally. We'll get there when we have to, but really, once India is well taken care of, then we'll think about it.
And at least now you feel there is enough headroom for you to grow within India.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, to give you context, there are probably over 10,000 clinics in Delhi NCR alone.
Wow.
And we got just 200, right? So if you think about the context of it, we're very small. There are about at least 300,000 dental clinics in the country, and we got 500, so 550, right? It's just, we are not even a drop in the bucket.
Sure. Why does India not have a comprehensive dental plan like in other countries? And is it one of the reasons why the penetration of oral healthcare among regular individuals is low?
Yeah, I think it's, I'll answer this question with a little bit of math, if I will, right? Insurance works with the principle that 1,000 people will pay and one person will redeem, right? That's the only way it works, right? A large number of people will pay a premium, and only a small number of people will at a given time redeem for their services. So unfortunately, for dental, 90% of Indians have a dental disease. So the incidence rate of dental disease is the highest among any disease. Rightly so, because that's the only cavity in your body that you take everything. You breathe in, you drink, you eat, you smoke. I mean, everything that goes in your body goes in from your mouth. And therefore, we abuse our mouth more than we abuse any part of our body, right? Before we can abuse our liver, we have to drink alcohol from your mouth, right? So you abuse your mouth more than, I say abuse in
even tea, coffee is a form of
exactly. I mean, I jokingly say abuse, but my point is that we are using our mouth more than we are. So therefore, the bacteria, infection, all of those are, and you can imagine every morning when you wake up, I'm sure everybody will appreciate that our mouth does have a bad breath. Why? Because the bacteria worked all night in your mouth, even after you brushed at night, it still worked in your mouth. So there is a lot of microorganisms that are active. So dental disease is the most common disease, and therefore insurance models don't work. Now, the insurance model only work when, and now the problem is that Indians don't look after their teeth. So every time they come, they're already looking for a treatment which is worth more than their insurance premium. So therefore, the insurance models will take some time. It will work when people start to come look after their teeth. Teeth generally become healthier. The average rate of people going into root canals, everybody's catching their problems at scaling and fillings. Root canals and extractions are not happening. Then insurance can come in as well, right? So it's a development of the market.
Sure. And don't want to be appearing to give you advice, not knowing a damn thing about
Please, I would love to hear opinions.
But I was just curious about something. Once you reach upwards of 1,000 clinics, when can we expect a Netflix-like subscription plan from Clove Dental? Because unlike insurance, there would not be a problem of adverse selection in your case.
Correct.
Somebody who is coming,
Yes.
let's say, in order to be a part of that plan, if somebody is coming to you for regular checkup twice a year,
Yes.
Will that make a lot of sense for you as a company?
Yeah, and absolutely good point. And we have certain plans already.
Sure.
We have small plans. We call dental health plan, which is about 500 rupees that gives you certain benefits. So these are small. I think we have complex preventive care plans as well. So we have those plans, and many of our patients use those plans. Once they come in, they get familiar. We also have a preventive care plan where we actually send you a complimentary part of take your problems at home. We'll send you a kit every quarter. So there are a number of things that we have once you're a patient. We don't advertise them. We don't offer them to everyone. We offer them only to our patients who've come in who've understood the value, because we don't want to necessarily get patients to pay for stuff that they don't really, end up using. We are here for the long term. So
sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about policy and regulations as an enabling environment for private businesses like you. Three specific subheaders. One would be, let's say, the investment that the government is making on digital public infrastructure for health. Second would be standardization of or protocols or accreditation of clinics, hospitals. And third is probably a slightly more controversial point, but capping off the fee that a provider can charge. How do you see, what are the positives? What do you as a business expect going forward from the government?
Yeah, so I think government has made a lot of positive changes since I've been in this country back. So I've seen a lot of positive change. I'm not politically affiliated by any means, so my views are purely based on what I see. So I think the current government has made a significant amount of improvements that I've seen. So right now, in healthcare in general, the challenge, of course, with dental is that dental is not life-threatening, and if you are the government and you have to, you have a limited dollars to allocate, then rightly you want to allocate those dollars to life-threatening issues and life-saving issues. And sort of, you go to the top of the hierarchy and you go, maybe helping pregnant women, whatever the policies are. I'm not familiar with them, but you start with the most pressing life-threatening problems, as it should be. Dental, therefore, comes a little bit lower on that spectrum. So therefore, I'm not surprised that the policies so far in dental have been a little bit behind because of that reason. But I think, there is a new dental, there's a change. There's a dental council was dissolved recently. There's a new National Council for Dental. So there's a bunch of change happening at the government that will be for the better, that will further look at it and say, this is a significant challenge that impacts the productivity. Imagine if you have a dental issue, your entire day or a couple of days of your productive life is gone, because you're going to spend a day in the clinic, then you're going to recover from it. So and if you have a pain a day before, you're not able to concentrate. So it has, productivity issues. It has impact on your income. So there is a bunch of things that it does, but it is not going to kill you, right? So that's the reason why it falls a little behind. But I think, I'm positive and optimistic that more positive things are coming in our way. With respect to, what was the second part of your question? So one was the government, right? What was the second part?
The digital public infrastructure in health, how does it impact the oral care industry?
Yeah, so I think the digital infrastructure, we had to build our own network because, again, dental is a fairly unique and an independent medical field. By the way, there's a reason why dental is, every other part of the body is medical doctor, mouth is dental. And you wonder why. I asked that question when I started the company. Why is it that dentistry is different from, why my feet, my toes are looked after the medical doctor, but my teeth are looked out by a dentist? Why? And the reason is because dental is surgical, and the medical students start dental practical training first year onwards. In medicine, they go to practical training 3 year onwards. So the curriculum is such that dental is so hands-on that they actually many years ago, they bifurcated and said, hey, for dental, those who choose dental will end up going to clinical studies a year after they start, versus medicine you have to do 3 years. So therefore the field got separated, but it is a very important part of your body, and therefore it is a medical profession. Yeah.
Sure. In the age of e-commerce or quick commerce, should we expect a dentist coming to my home and delivering care, or at least some part of it?
Absolutely. I think we have already launched a mobile dental unit. Now, what we will do there is we will do diagnostics and consultations at home, not treatments, because treatment does require the specialized equipment we talked at the earlier. So, but we already have about 40 odd mobile doctors who are going to the consumer's home, to help particularly those who are busy or elderly, or there are a bunch of reasons why that you may want to be able to, you don't want to take a whole day off, drive for half an hour, you may be more willing to have someone come to your house. So we are doing that, and I think that will keep growing. So I think that's probably one of the areas that will grow the most in dental in the next few years, particularly for Clove as well. Today we have about 50, which is 10% of our clinics, give or take. I see a day when we'll be on par. Or if we have 1,000 clinics, we might have 1,000 mobile doctors down the road who will be out there helping those clients who are unable to come. And it's good for us as well, because if I go to your home, it can look after your particular concern. But maybe your mom and dad are sitting next to you, or your wife and child are sitting next to you, and maybe they're not having they don't have an immediate issue.
Yeah.
But the doctor can catch some issues before they become severe, it will only be a value add for your entire family. So therefore, we will see a lot more of this happening.
Yeah, actually 90% of the friction is booking an appointment with a dentist and going to a dental clinic.
Exactly.
So if that friction is solved,
Exactly, because the biggest, people always try to procrastinate. Humans don't want to go to dentist anyways because I don't want to go there. So they're already kind of finding excuses not to go. And then you add parking, driving, taking a time off from work, blah, blah. You start adding all those reasons, you start, pushing, adding more reason for people not to show up, right? So that's why.
As you scale from 500 clinics to 5,000 in the coming years, do you see that at least on paper there are good enough asset available for you to roll over, or is it just simpler for you to grow organically?
Right. I think there are a number of clinics that would make sense to do rollover. However, the challenge is those doctors have to be willing to change their ways to adapt to a more standardized way that we operate.
Somebody is running their practice for 20 years and your AI is telling them to do this or do that. I think that would be a point of
and especially, if the practice is not so good, then we are probably not interested in getting them anyways, right?
Sure.
And the practice, the only ones we would want to roll over are the practices that are doing well. And if they're doing well, then the doctor would say, hey, why do I have to change? You're getting me because I'm doing so well. Sometime for them to recognize that maybe by slight changes, they could see a benefit. Those changes are not easy to come by. So when the doctors are ready, and I think we are closer to it than we were before, because they have to then accept as a viable, reliable, credible source to partner with, right? The first 6, 7, 8 years pre-COVID, they always looked at as the competition, right? The big gorilla was coming in and trying to, but now they're realizing that actually we are helping elevate the entire dental community, because many of our doctors who worked with us have gone on to do other things. So in essence, us bringing organized care is in some ways helping elevate because they also have to build clinics that look like ours. They have to improve their quality standards. So it really does lift. That was my early mission, to make a social impact. Social impact, in my business, but it's also making an impact in the industry. And that's what we like. So our mission actually is that we want to transform the dental landscape in India. It doesn't say that our mission is to, build dental clinics for ourselves. Our mission is to transform the dental landscape for India.
Sure. On that note, and especially in the last 7-8 years after 2017-18, good amount of VC capital has also gone into the ecosystem. By the way, you did not raise VC capital throughout your
We just did last year.
That's more sort of a private
Growth
equity,
capital,
growth
yes.
capital. Okay.
We did raise, what we did was we raised capital, but we raised it from HNIs and family offices.
Got it.
So we went to what we would call patient capital.
Who don't have a fund life.
Who don't have a
6-7
fund
years
life,
yeah.
because I've been through that cycle before. When you have a fund life, the funds want to churn their capital, and this business I knew needed about 7 years before it would be ready to show a path to VC. And now, of course, 7, then COVID happened, that cost us a few years. But so we raised our first institutional round in 2022, end of 23, just call it December 22, early 23. So early last year, right, is when we raised our
Especially
capital.
if you're a provider, nothing gets built before 10 years in India.
Yeah, well, but particularly if you're looking at infrastructure, you have to, there's a lot of things, systems to build. All these things I talk about, the audit, the peer review mechanism, it took us 3 years to perfect it. Imagine, how do you get doctors to appreciate that some other colleague of theirs will look at their work and provide a second opinion? And that takes a lot of, they have to feel comfortable that we are not trying to find their faults, we're just helping them. It's not. So it took some time. These things take time.
Sure. So in the last 7-8 years, despite so much of infusion from the venture capital side, why haven't we seen breakthrough companies coming in the dental space?
Yeah, I think the reason is, which we discussed, a number of the reasons we talked about earlier, that because we are a largely people business, we are really, what is our product, right? And like you mentioned, dialysis earlier, in dialysis center, what is the product? Product is the machines. Yeah. That, and somebody who knows how to, qualified doctors who know how to run them, but you're going in and you have a repetitive need, and you go there and you stick your needles and you know what you're getting. You have a pretty standardized set of a product, right? In dental, it is really, our product is our doctor, right? So, you don't know what the problem is with your mouth. You will come in, our doctor will tell you what the problem is. You may not believe in him. If you don't believe in him, you're not going to be very happy. So our product is the doctor. So we are a much more of a people business than even in healthcare. Because in healthcare, yes, the surgeon is important for sure, but the stent is also equally important for the heart, right? Whereas in dental, yes, it's important, but people don't appreciate it. So the only thing that matters is the doctor and the doctor quality. So that is, so we are improving, and I think our doctors are phenomenal. I mean, I'm so proud to work with them, but that's just...
What would be your advice to entrepreneurs who are now trying to start in the healthcare space, with or without money?
Yeah, I think, it is, you got to have the right reasons to be in it. If you're looking to make a quick buck, this isn't the industry. So if you're looking an entrepreneur to become a unicorn very quickly, then this is not that industry, right? I mean, you can become a unicorn, and we will, we are close to being a unicorn, but it'll take some time, and it'll be already 11 years, 12 years in. So I would say you have to think the long term. Second, healthcare, unless you have truly a caring and a social bone in your body that you want to do something, because you have to, every single time we are making choices, and we are making choices that are better for the consumers than for the business. I'll give you an example. All our doctors were hired as full-time employees, which means our payroll cost in the early days was 300% of our revenue, right? Because we were paying more than our income was. But we said, unless we have doctors who are fully dedicated, they're not going to have the vested interest in making sure our patients got the right treatment, right? So we made certain tough decisions that are not easy to make. So therefore, if you want to be an entrepreneur in healthcare, be ready to make tough decisions. Make sure you have the desire to do some good, along with build a profitable business. But the beauty of healthcare is that it takes time to build, but then it's a very, very sticky business.
Got it.
right? The ramp up Clove is slow, but the ramp down doesn't usually happen.
Yeah, that's
right?
right. Yeah. Let's do a rapid fire now.
Sure.
Three questions. First question is: imagine you're with your family to Mumbai, and somebody in your family develops a toothache or some problem. Will you walk into a Clove Dental clinic without checking who the doctor is?
100%.
Awesome. If you were to invest 3 checks of $1 million each on somebody building an early venture in the healthcare space, what would those spaces be?
Right. So I think I would be in healthcare tech. I would do in training, skill development, and then I would also do on manufacturing equipment and infrastructure. Right. So those are the areas that I would say, train, technology and materials, equipment. Today we are importing 80% of our materials and equipment just because India doesn't make enough of them. So.
Got it. How far are we from a future when I walk into a Clove Dental clinic and a robot does all the procedure, a humanless Clove Dental clinic?
Yeah, I think it's pretty far. The reason for that is that dental is a very hands-on skill, and it's a very intricate and it's very custom business. Your mouth and my mouth are completely different, right? Your one tooth problems, in fact, your one molar may have 3 roots. I may have 5 roots. I mean, that's how in one molar. And so that being said, there are going to be portions of treatments where robotic assistance is a doctor will use robots as a tool to help. But I don't see, I always say to my doctors that dentist is probably among the last professions that AI or robots will replace. So we're in that way we are in a good space.
If you, throughout your Clove Dental journey, if you can go back and correct one mistake or do one thing differently compared to how you did in the past, what would that be?
Wow. That's an interesting question. I have to think about it because, I would say that we, as an entrepreneur, you take the problems that you're facing with, you do the best you can, and you make mistakes, you learn from them, and then you move on. Looking back and harping over mistakes over and over again and getting depressed about it is not an entrepreneurial trait. So therefore, I don't have a ready answer for that question. I really don't. I have to think. I mean, there are probably hundreds of things that we've done wrong that we would fix, but we're fixing them. It's learning experience. So I don't think there's anything one that is so huge that I can pick out. I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question.
No, that's this is a series of mistakes.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, we're making mistakes all the time, so I really don't have one that my God. But yeah, there are so many.
Great. It was great talking to you, Amar, and thank you for being super candid. And it's very inspiring the way you married your business acumen with patient centricity and built this amazing company.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the show. I have one last question before we conclude. Learning from your life, if you have to give one advice to your daughters, and they are teenagers, so I'm quite sure they would not listen anyway, but let's hope that they are listening to this show, two old men talking to each other. What would be that one life advice that you will give them that life taught you the hard way?
Yeah, and I think what I'm now 55, so it's I'm going to talk my age, but the advice would be that we have all very short lives. Happiness and health is the most important thing, right? And I think the world spends too much time trying to do stuff that is just for others' benefit. So do what makes you happy and what keeps you healthy. In fact, my older one is in LA. She's in final year in college. I tell her, listen, do whatever you want to do. Just don't jeopardize your health. Don't jeopardize your safety, and be happy. That's it. I don't care what else you do. So, probably, maybe we are lucky that we are, economically, we are in a position where we don't have to worry about food on the table. So maybe my perspective is a little different. I think, growing up in a middle-class family, I know that my parents and others having enough safety net, having enough of those were a big concerns. But, I realize that if you have just amount, there's never going to be enough. So at the end, seek happiness and stay healthy.
That's a great advice. Thank you for being part of the show, Amar.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. Very good show. Thank you.